In section 1.2, we talk about operations with real numbers. So let's talk about absolute values first. So the absolute value of a number x, which can be written with these two bars, can be visualized as the distance from 0 on a number line. So if we talk about the absolute value of -5, we can see that there are 5 units from -5 to 0. So the absolute value of -5 is 5. Same thing goes for the absolute value of 5. There are 5 units from 5 to 0. So the absolute value of +5 is still 5. So let's go ahead and evaluate. The absolute value of 5 minus 3. Well, that's just the absolute value of 2, and the absolute value of 2 is 2. What about the absolute value of -1.9? Well, that's just going to be +1.9. What about the absolute value of -6 minus 4? Well, that's the absolute value of -10, which is just going to give me 10. Now what about adding and subtracting real numbers? So we have some rules we need to go over. The first rule, Rule 1.1, says to add two real numbers with the same sign, we add their absolute values, and the sum will take the common sign. So let's try that with example number 2. -5 plus -0.6. Well, they have the same sign, so we just want to add the numbers normally. 5 and 0.6 gives me 5.6, and then we keep the same sign, which is negative, so we get -5.6. What about -1/2 plus -1/3? We all know how much you love fractions, so the first thing we need to do is have a common denominator. So between 2 and 3, we can get to 6. So I'm going to multiply the first fraction by 3 on the top and bottom, and the second fraction by 2 on the top and bottom. So that's like having -3 over 6 plus -2 over 6. When we add fractions, we keep the denominator the same, we just add the numerators. So -3 plus -2 is going to give me -5, and then we just keep the denominator as 6. Rule 1.2 says to add two real numbers with different signs. Then we find the difference between their absolute values. The answer takes the sign of the number with the largest absolute value. So if the bigger number is positive, then it'll be a positive number. If the bigger number is negative, then it will be a negative number. So let's go ahead and try that with 12 plus -5. Well, because 12 is bigger than 5, that means our answer is going to be positive. And then we want to take the difference. So 12 minus 5. Well, that is just going to give me a positive 7. Negative 1/3 plus 1/4. Again, we need to have a common denominator. So these both go into 12. So I'm going to multiply the first fraction by 4 and the second fraction by 3. So this gives me negative 4 over 12 plus 3 over 12. Now because 4 is bigger than 3, that means that my answer is going to be negative. And then 4 minus 3 gives me 1, and that's going to be over 12. Same idea happens with 1/2 plus negative 1/6. Gotta have a common denominator. 2 and 6 both go into 6. So I only need to fix the first fraction. And I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by 3. Well, this ends up giving me 3 over 6 plus negative 1 over 6. And since 3 is the bigger number and it's positive, my answer will be positive. And 3 minus 1 is 2 over 6. But we can simplify this because we can divide out a 2. We end up getting 1/3. Rule 1.3 says to subtract b from a, we add the opposite, or that additive inverse we talked about before, of b to a. So a minus b is going to turn into a plus negative b. So let's go ahead and try that. We got 5 minus 7. We can rewrite this as 5 plus negative 7. And then we're referring back to that rule beforehand. We have two different signs, and because 7 is the bigger number and it's negative, that means that my answer will be negative, and we take the difference between 7 and 5, which is 2, so we end up getting negative 2 as an answer. What about negative 12 minus negative 3? So we keep the first number, we change this to a plus, and then we bring the negative to the second one. Well, those two negatives end up becoming two positives. So this is like saying negative 12 plus 3. And because 12 is the bigger number and it's negative, answer is going to be negative, and we get negative 9. And we can rewrite negative 0.06 plus negative 0.55. They're both negative, so we just need to add them together, and we get negative 0.61. What about multiplying and dividing real numbers? So rule 1.4 says that when you multiply or divide two real numbers with different signs, then you get a negative number for your answer. So 5 times negative 8, one's positive and one's negative. That means I'm going to get negative 40. Negative 5 times 2 over 17. Again, we have two different signs. And just as a refresher, when we multiply fractions, we multiply across the top and the bottom. So I rewrote negative 5 as negative 5 over 1. And then we multiply across the top. So negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. And then 1 times 17 gives me 17. You always want to make sure you can't break it down anymore and we can't with negative 10 and 17. And 1.6 divided by negative 0.08. We get those two different numbers, and plugging that into your calculator, you end up getting negative 20. Rule 1.5 says that when you multiply or divide two real numbers with these same signs, then you will get a positive number for your answer. So two negatives gives me a positive, and two positives gives me a positive. So we have multiplication of fractions again. Negative 3/5 times negative 2 over 11. So multiplying across the top, 3 times 2, that's going to give me 6. And then 5 times 11 gives me 55. Negative 15 divided by negative 3. We got those two negatives going on, but we can turn this into positive 5. And then letter C tends to be the one most people forget. So we have this rule, and it's KCF. And that means keep, change, and flip. And we do this when we're dividing with fractions. So you keep the first fraction exactly the same. So 2/3 is not going to change. We change that division sign in the middle to multiplication, and we flip the second fraction. So now it's going to be 2/3 times 7/5. And then we're just going to multiply like normal. We've got 2 times 7, which is 14, and then 3 times 5, which is 15. Next thing we're going to talk about is division involving 0. So division by 0 is undefined, but 0 divided by anything is 0. And this can be a little bit confusing. So there is a little trick I like to remember. So if I have something of the form NO, where the 0 is on the bottom, that means this is not allowed. And so this is undefined. In the other case, if I have the 0 on the top, that is okay, and we end up just getting 0 as the answer. And the last thing we want to get into for this section is order of operations, which you probably have heard of PEMDAS. So the first thing you want to do is combine numbers inside grouping symbols. That's parentheses or brackets, something of that nature. Then we're going to raise numbers to their indicated powers and take any indicated roots. We multiply and divide numbers from left to right. This is what a lot of people forget. So multiplication and division happen on the same step, and they just go from left to right. Same thing for addition and subtraction. Same exact step, it just happens from left to right. So that doesn't mean that addition always has to go before subtraction. Subtraction could go first. So let's evaluate. We got negative 20 divided by negative 5 times 3 plus 6 minus 5 times negative 2. So the first thing is multiplication and division, because we don't have any grouping symbols and we don't have any powers. So the first thing is this division that's happening right here. Negative 20 divided by negative 5 is going to give me positive 4, and then I'm going to rewrite the rest. Times 3 plus 6 minus 5 times negative 2. And we just keep going. Then we've got 4 times 3 that we can do, and negative 5 times negative 2. So 4 times 3 gives me 12, plus 6, and negative 5 times negative 2 gives me positive 10. And then we just want to add all three numbers together. We got 12 plus 6 plus 10, which is going to give me 28. When looking at B, we want to simplify the top and simplify the bottom separately, and then see if we can simplify the division going on. So 13 minus negative 3, remember that double negative turns into positives. And so we get 13 plus 3 on the top, which is 16. And then on the bottom, we're going to deal with both of these multiplications. 5 times negative 2 and negative 6 times negative 3. Well, 5 times negative 2 is negative 10, and negative 6 times negative 3 is positive 18. And so this is really 16 over 8, and 16 over 8 is just 2.